Replacing the keyboard and touchpad. Replacing the keyboard and touchpad. Replacing the keyboard is pretty easy to do. Here are typical steps that are similar to many models of notebooks. 1. Power down the notebook and remove the AC adapter in the battery pack. 2. Remove 2 or more screws on the bottom of the notebook, see figure 1950. Only the documentation can tell you which ones because there are probably several of them used to hold various components in place. 3. Turn the notebook over and open the lid. Gently push the keyboard toward the lid while pulling it up to release it from the case, see figure 19.5. 4. Bring the keyboard out of the case and forward to expose the keyboard ribbon cable attached underneath the board. Use a screwdriver to lift the cable connector up and out of its socket, see figure 1952. 5. Replace the keyboard following the steps in reverse order. Sometimes the touchpad and keyboard are one complete field replaceable unit. If the touchpad is a separate component, it might be part of the keyboard bezel, also called the palm rest. This bezel is the flat cover that surrounds the keyboard. Most likely you have to remove the keyboard before you can remove the keyboard bezel. Replacing optical drives. For some systems you'll need to first remove the keyboard to expose an optical drive. Follow along as we remove the DVD drive from one system. 1. Remove the keyboard. 2. Remove the screw that holds the DVD drive to the notebook, see figure 1953. 3. Slide the drive out of the bay, see figure 1954. 4. When you slide the new drive into the bay, make sure you push it far enough into the bay that it solidly connects with the drive connector at the back of the bay. Replace a screw. For other systems, the optical drive can be removed by first removing a cover from the bottom of the notebook. Then you remove one screw that secures the drive. Next, push the optical drive out of the case, see figure 1955. Replacing expansion cards. A notebook does not contain the normal PCI Express or PCI slots found in desktop systems. Newer notebooks are likely to use the mini PCI Express slots, also called mini PCI slots, that use the PCI Express standards applied to notebooks. Mini PCI Express slots use 52 pins on the edge connector. These slots can be used by many kinds of mini PCI cards. These cards are often used to enhance communications options for a notebook, including Wi-Fi wireless, cellular WAN, and Bluetooth mini PCI cards. Figure 1956 shows a mini PCI Express Sierra wireless mobile broadband internet card. Older notebooks use a mini PCI slot, see figure 1957, which uses PCI standards. Mini PCI cards are about twice the size of mini PCI Express cards. Figure 1958 shows a Wi-Fi mini PCI card by MikroTik. For many laptops, you can remove a cover on the bottom of the laptop to expose expansion cards so that you can exchange them without an extensive disassemble. For example, to remove the cover on the bottom of one Lenovo laptop, first remove several screws and then lift the laptop cover up and out. Several internal components are exposed, as shown in figure 1959. The half-size mini PCI wireless Wi-Fi card shown in figure 1960 has 2 antennas. To remove the card, first remove the one screw shown in the photo and disconnect the 2 black and white antenna wires. Then slide the card forward and out of the slot. You can then install a new card. Figure 1961 shows a full-size mini PCI card installed in a different laptop. First disconnect the one antenna and remove the one screw at the top of the card, and then pull the card forward and out of the slot. After you have installed a mini PCI card that is a Bluetooth, cellular WAN, or other wireless adapter, try to connect the notebook to the wireless network. If you have problems making a connection, verify that Device Manager reports the device is working properly and that Event Viewer has not reported error events about the device. Replacing the processor. When replacing or upgrading the processor in a laptop, be sure to select a processor supported by the notebook manufacturer for this particular notebook. The range of processors supported by a notebook does not usually include as many options as those supported by a desktop motherboard. Some signify canned Intel mobile processor sockets include FPGA 988, PPGA 988, and the older PPGA 478. Currently the FPGA 988 is the most popular Intel mobile socket. AMD sockets for mobile processors include sockets S1, AM2+, and ASB1. By far, the most used AMD mobile socket is the 638-pin S1 socket. For many laptops, removing the cover on the bottom of a laptop exposes the processor fan and heatsink assembly. When you remove this assembly, you can then open the socket and remove the processor. For example, looking back at the laptop shown in figure 1959, you can see the processor heatsink and fan assembly exposed. To remove the assembly, remove the 7 screws and the fan power connector, see figure 1962. Then lift the assembly straight up, being careful not to damage the processor underneath. For another laptop, the heatsink and fan assembly is also exposed when you remove the cover on the bottom of the laptop, see figure 1963. Notice the heatsink on this laptop extends to the processor and chipset. You remove several screws and then lift the entire assembly out as a unit. For both laptops, the heatsink fits on top of the processor and the fan sits to the side of the processor. This design is typical of many laptops. However, some laptops require you to remove the keyboard and the keyboard bezel to reach the fan assembly and processor under the bezel. Figure 1964 shows the heatsink and fan assembly removed in one laptop, exposing the processor. Notice the thermal compound on the processor. To remove the processor, turn the CPU socket screw 90 degrees to open the socket, as shown in the figure. Most Intel and AMD sockets have this socket screw on the side of the socket, as shown in figure 1964, although other sockets have the screw on the corner of the socket. Lift the CPU from the socket. Be careful to lift straight up without bending the CPU pins. Figure 1965 shows the processor out of the socket. If you look carefully, you can see the missing pins on one corner of the processor and socket. This corner is used to correctly orient the processor in the socket, which is socket 478B. Before you place the new processor into the socket, be sure the socket screw is in the open position. Then delicately place the processor into its socket. If it does not drop in completely, consider that the screw might not be in the full open position. Be sure to use thermal compound on top of the processor. Intel recommends 0.2 grams of compound, which is about the size of a small pea. To make sure you use just the right amount of compound, consider buying it in individual packets that are measured for a single application. Replacing the motherboard. Replacing the motherboard probably means you'll need to fully disassemble the entire notebook except the LCD assembly. Therefore, before you tackle the job, consider alternatives. If a port or component on the motherboard fails, consider installing an external device. Copyright. Rather than replacing the motherboard, also called the system board. Also, before you decide to replace the motherboard, check if the notebook manufacturer has diagnostic software you can download and use to verify the problem is the motherboard. Search the site for information about the error message or symptom. Replacing the motherboard is a big deal, so consider that the cost of repair, including parts and labor, might be more than the laptop is worth. A new laptop might be your best solution. Here is the general procedure for replacing the motherboard in one notebook. 1. Remove the keyboard, optical drive, and mini keycard. 2. The next step is to remove the notebook lid and keyboard bezel assembly. To do this, first remove 2 screws on the back of the notebook, see figure 1966, and the screws on the bottom of the notebook. You can then crack the case by lifting the notebook lid and keyboard bezel from the case, see figure 1967. 3. Lift up the assembly and look underneath to see 2 cables connecting the assembly to the motherboard, see figure 1968. Disconnect these 2 cables and set the assembly aside. 4. Figure 1969 shows the open case. To remove the CPU fan assembly, remove screws, see figure 1970, and then lift the fan assembly up. Then open the CPU socket and remove the CPU. 5. The DVD drive can now be removed, and the motherboard is fully exposed. 6. Remove a single screw that holds the motherboard in place, see Figure 1971, and lift the board out of the case. Figure 1972 shows the top of the board, and Figure 1973 shows the bottom. Both top and bottom are packed with components. When reassembling the system, all steps are done in reverse. That will be all in this C-Tech episode. Tune into next Monday for replacing the LCD panel D. We love you all. Thanks for watching C-Tech. Starred 1035. Thank you for watching C-Tech, and make sure you hit that subscribe and notification bell icon so you won't miss any future episodes of C-Tech.